How did art help win a court case? Well, in the 1970s, the Tennessee Valley Authority wanted to build a dam. It was a completely unnecessary dam. They could not justify it with needing to create electricity or for flood control. There were already 4 major dams within 50 miles of this particular project, but they had their heart set on it. Now, where this dam was to be built, it was the last 33 miles of free-flowing river, hence all the other dams, and it was an archaeologist's dream, including sites with 10,000 years of human habitation. It was home to Cherokee ancestral lands and the continued cultural practices of medicine gathering and fishing with the same fish traps they built in the 1700s. There was lots of recreation, including the Boy and Girl Scouts, family river floats, where people would stop along beaches and look for arrowheads, and it was the last amazing spot for recreational trout fishing. On top of that, the valley was full of rich, fertile soils. And it was on those rich, fertile soils that 330 family farms operated in approximately 60 square miles that would be condemned by this dam. The farms were largely low income, owned and run by families that had lived there for nearly 8 generations. Yet the law would protect none of this. Now, for such projects, you have to have an environmental impact assessment. And this assessment did propose better alternatives, both ecologically and economically. But the Tennessee Valley Authority did not care. They pushed forward and tried to come up with some justification for the dam, even though they didn't need the electricity and they didn't need the flood control. So they threw together some shenanigans saying that the condemned lands would be resold as lakefront property, a model city called Timberlake, and there'd be 26,000 new jobs, and Boeing will build it. Boeing took one look at the project, said it was economically ridiculous, and walked away. Even the governor of Tennessee said, "Please don't do this project." The Tennessee Valley Authority told the governor he didn't know what his people needed and carried on anyway. But one day, some biologists, thinking they were doing the final census of this river before the completion of the dam, they found a funny little brown fish they'd never seen before. And they'd been working in these rivers for a very long time, so the fact that they'd never seen it before pretty much guaranteed it was endangered, and turns out it was. It was the Snail Darter. Now, art comes into play because a 3-inch unremarkable brown fish is kind of hard to get a lot of public support and advocacy for, right? The Endangered Species Act and other laws regarding animals suffer from what's called the Panda problem. Basically, this means a species with public appeal, right? Like charismatic megafauna. Charming, large animals. Think polar bears, wolves, and sea turtles. And of course, pandas. They get a bunch of advocacy from conservation groups and media coverage and political attention, and when they do become protected, they get all the funding, even if there's other less visually appealing animals that play a more important role in the ecosystem. So anyway, it wasn't hard for the media to portray this stupid little fish preventing a really important big hydroelectric dam from being built. And of course, the lead attorney on the case tried to explain to the court that this was actually a puny dam and didn't even have generators. But this narrative had already been in the media and in the public mind. And guess who's part of the public? The judge and jury. So what is a little brown fish to do when the media calls it stupid? Call in the artists. So Underwater photography, not so great. The only photos that existed of the snail darter were very scientific, and the field notes were a bit dry. So, to counteract the lack of charisma, the lead attorney, Zygmunt Platter, commissioned paintings of the fish to use as exhibits in court. Now, the point was to showcase the unique features of this fish to give the judges and the public a more tangible and more cute image of what was at stake. As art often does, these paintings offered a way to connect with something that was so different from ourselves. And it's that connection that provides the opportunity for empathy and highlights the broader environmental and ethical issues at play. And it worked! There are quite a few reports that suggest that the paintings in the court made it harder for opponents to write off the fish as a insignificant minnow, which was a common tactic used to undermine its protection. And after this case, and throughout the 1970s and currently, there's legal and environmental psychology research exploring how visuals shape judicial and public perceptions of endangered species. A lot of the key takeaways are that visual framing is very powerful and has a significant impact on public support for conservation laws. And judicial decisions can be shaped by the emotional and cognitive effect of such visuals. And as we know from the panda problem, it is hard to get visually appealing animals to gain protection and funding. So we can see with the snail darter that art is a powerful tool for change. And that's why authoritarian governments try to censor it immediately. So, the next time you hear the narrative of environment versus jobs, remember there's probably more to the story, right? If you only read the Supreme Court case, it does look like environment versus jobs, right? Fish v. dam. But it was so much more than that. It was indigenous heritage. It was farmers. It was the whole ecosystem that people interacted with and loved on a regular basis. Not only that, but there is no job or economy without an environment. Further, there's the philosophy that we are nature because we are absolutely, completely interconnected. And if you want the full story, you should check local news because typically they can tell a more nuanced story with more details about how it impacts them that you don't always get from national news that has to simplify things and exaggerate them to sell. Okay, so if you want to dive into the art of using art to tell a story, to capture people's minds, hearts, and imagination, just like the snail darter did, you should check out my workshop, Finding Your Voice as an Art Activist. Our artwork has and will continue to change the world. More power to the artists, the storytellers, and the people.